All right. Wholeness now. What's happening with y'all? It's been a minute. I've been gone. Hoping everybody been balanced out. I'm just sliding in here real quick, man, because a lot of people have been actually asking me a lot of questions about sovereignty and not just physical sovereignty, but, spiritual sovereignty too. Because whether you know it or not, sovereignty starts inside of you, which makes it a spiritual sovereignty. And you gain a better understanding of what sovereignty is and a knowledge of self by studying, by reading. Real life shit, man. I mean, like they say, if you want to hide something from a nigga, put it in a book. Like they wasn't playing, man. They wasn't lying, because you know what? They got us so occupied and entertained with the reality in so many different useless and meaningless ways that all of the things that are most important are these fictitious laws and agreements and contracts that we are actually being foisted upon unknowingly without our knowledge. You see what I mean? So this is like the catalyst of how everything is moving in a direction that it's actually moving through contractual agreements. You just don't understand the contracts. Now, today we actually finna get into this, man, because I want to give y'all a better understanding of what's going on. So I got something that I want to read to y'all. I got something I want to show to y'all. I got a few things I want to read to y'all and show to y'all so we can get a better understanding of what's taking place. But because we're talking about sovereignty and how to actually acquire your position in the reality as a secure party creditor, meaning that you have complete entitlement to the secured trust that was actually created in your name. And a lot of people might think that this is a fiction or some type of a hoax, because you know what, for the most part, you're listening to people that's afraid. And the people that you're listening to that's afraid are only afraid because they're listening to or getting their information from government funded websites. And I'm finna show you why it's so adamant, why they're so persistent on deterring you from even gaining the inkling of an idea of what this information means and how you actually tie it all in. Because whether you knew it or not, when you was born, nobody had dominion or rulership over you but your creator. And the world that you've been foisted into, and I know a lot of people might not think that that's important, but just imagine if you tell that to somebody, or one of these young ladies who just lost a son or lost a daughter because one of these police had a nervous trip for the day and started shooting. And this is happening systematically. And this is the reason I'm bringing this information to my people like I'm bringing it right now. Because for the most part, I just want y'all to get a real good understanding of how you're actually being thrown into the reality the way that you actually are. And you feel like you don't have any remedy or solution to it, but you do. It's just inside of a whole new space of context and contents that you would never even expect to look. Because you have so much to do, so much entertainment to keep your mind occupied when you're not working. You see? So the system is set up and designed in a way to keep you occupied and never inside of a mental place or a space of your reality there where you can actually discover who you are, define who and what you are inside and manifest that. But literally to manifest that. So listen, I don't want to keep y'all time up on something, man. I want to go ahead and just get straight into this so I can show y'all something. Now, first and foremost, I want y'all to understand what I'm going to read to y'all is actually a speech between two people. One of those people being Woodrow Wilson, and I'll explain to you in a minute. Now, this is sent by the powers that rule the democracy commercial government from England, worked with and controlled all the presidents from Woodrow Wilson through Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and establishing all that the American people believe or they are reaping by slavery. I'm sorry, y'all got to give me 1 second. My screen just blanked out. You got to expect stuff like that to happen inside of these types of moments, man. Let me recover my moment. Now, let me just get into it. Now, very soon, every American would be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being able to work and earn a living. They would be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secure transactions. Americans, by unknowingly and unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves to the taxation secured by their pledges. They would be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and it would be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure our plans. And if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance, without realizing that every American will insure us for any loss we may incur. And in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. Now, I want y'all to understand that I didn't write this. This is not me. This is not mine. And I don't know if many of y'all understand who Woodrow Wilson is. That's the reason I explained to you that the person that's being, or the second party in this conversation between the President Woodrow Wilson, right, reigned between 1913 through 1921. And I mean reigned, not served, because there are no service members. There are no such thing as public officials. They're all private associations, private corporations, acting under the color of law, not under the guise or under law. They're not operating and functioning under the protections of law. They're operating under the color of law. And this is the reason that they use statutes, codes, regulations, and things like that, because those, though they only apply to the corporate body that signs off on those bills, they have tricked us and manipulated us into believing that those statutes, codes, and regulations apply to us as free people too. Now I'm finna show you this. I'm finna get further into this. I want you to get a little bit deeper into this. Now, when you were born, your parents registered you with the government as a corporation by receiving and signing a birth certificate. Your corporation will receive a taxpayer ID number called a social security number. This is so you can be used as collateral for the government to acquire debt. That's right. And you and your labor, time and energy is what backs up the national debt. You are a stock. Trust me, there's no such thing as a debt. Money is printed by demand. Your signature is what creates money. Now, every taxpayer is a Cestui Que trust having sufficient interest in the preventing abuse of the courts to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. Now, this is not me writing these things. This is law. This is case law. You see what I mean? Now, case law and statutory law, those are two different things. Legislature, constitutional law, these are all different forms of law. You have a lot of different forms of law. Like you have admiralty law, mercantile law, maritime law. You have statutory law, case law. You have fiduciary law, bankruptcy law, canon law. You have common law. You see what I mean? You have so many different types of law, administrative law. Like this is really, you have to be able to understand the types of jurisdictions that they're trying to place you under, but we finna get into that too. Now, a citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as a co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the PCT, Public Charitable Trust, the constructive Cestui Que Trust of U.S. Inc., meaning U.S. Incorporated, under the 14th Amendment, which holds the debt of the USA and the U.S. Incorporated. Congressional Records, June 13, 1967. Now, do you understand? Because see, I'm finna take you into something real nice and I'm talking about real nice and crispy for you. so that you can get a better understanding of how you've been manipulated into believing that you have to work for the system for a living, when in reality you don't. The system has to work for you for a living. But they've created a back door, a monopoly inside of the system that gave them the authority, not the authority, I ain't gonna say that, let me retract that word, gave them the ability to come in and create commercial instruments that were capable of causing you to commit contractual agreements with them, bringing you into their jurisdiction as a U.S. citizen and not an American citizen. And we finna get into that too, because I want to show you the distinction between an American citizen national, or an American national, not a citizen, because the word citizen, literally, you got to look it up in legalese. You'll see that. We're going to get into that too. Anyway, I don't want to go too far. I want to get straight into this. Now, remember this: a citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as a co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive Cestui Que Trust of U.S. Inc., under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. This is congressional record. Literally, June 13, 1967, paper page 15,641 through paper page 15,646. So now let me get this, because I want you to get a real good understanding of what is the Cestui Que. Some people might be like, well, what is the Cestui Que? All right. And just in case you like, well, what is the Cestui Que? I have to show you so that you'll get a real good understanding. Now, step one, understanding the secret Cestui Que Vie Act of 1666. Yeah, 1666. Check me out. Now, London in 1606, during the Black Plague and Great Fires of London, Parliament enacted an act behind closed doors called the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1666. The act being debated was to subrogate the rights of men and women, meaning all men and women were declared dead, lost at sea, and or beyond the sea. Back then, operating an admiralty law, the law of the sea, so lost at sea. And this is the reason that you see every nation, every recognized nation has to have a flag, because these flags represent something. And what you think is that American flag? No, what that is a military flag. It's actually a presidential war flag. You see, Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually was the one that created that flag, or brought that specific flag with the three gold, bronze, gold bars or brackets or what on it. Anyway, because I don't want to get too far off. Now, we got a few things to go through. The act, okay, now, the state London took custody of everybody and their property into a trust. The state became the trustee / husband, holding all titles to the people and property until a living man comes back and reclaims those titles. He can also claim damages. Now, check me out. I know y'all might be wondering, well, what London got to do with us? Oh, I'm finna show you, just in case you don't know what the Bar Association actually is. That's from Britain. What is it? British Association Registry or something like that? Anyway, and that's a private association. They're not licensed. They have contracts, certificates. They're certified, they're not licensed. Anyway, they're a foreign entity, but I'll show you that now. When capital, okay, let me get back to that so you can see this. The state became the trustee / husband, holding all titles to the people and property until a living man comes back to reclaim those titles. He can claim also damages. Now, when capital letters are used anywhere in a name, this also refers to a legal entity / fiction, company or corporation, no exceptions. That is John Doe or Doe Jane. Anyway, Cestui Que, pronounced Cestui, common term in New Zealand and Australia. In America, we use the words enzligus or strawman. Now, these are the legal entity / fiction created and owned by the government whom created it. It is like owning a share in the stock market. You may own a share, but it is still a share of the stock. Legally, we are considered to be a fiction, a concept or idea expressed as a name, a symbol. Now, the legal person has no consciousness. It is a juristic person, Ens legis, a name and or a word written on a piece of paper. This traces back to 1666. London is an independent city-state, just like Vatican is an independent city-state, just like Washington, D.C. is an independent city-state. Now, the Crown is an unincorporated association. Why unincorporated? It's private. The Temple Bar is in London. Every lawyer called to the bar swears allegiance to the Temple Bar. You can't get called without swearing this allegiance. And don't let them lie to you, because I got the manuals. Our only way out is to reclaim your dead entity, your straw man that the crown created, actually. And this is how you have to become the executor and then collapse the so-called Cestui Que Vie trust and forgive yourself of all debts, and then remove yourself from the admiralty law that holds you in custody. When London burned, the subrogation of men's and women's right occurred. The Responsible Act passed, which was the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1666. And it meant that all men and women of UK were declared dead and lost beyond the seas. The state took everybody and everybody's property into a trust. The state takes control until a living man or a woman comes back and claims their titles by proving they are alive, and claims for damages can be made. Now, this is why you always need representation when involved in legal matters, because you're dead. The legal fiction is a construct on paper in a state in trust. When you get a bill or a summons from court, it is always in capital letters, similar to tombstones and graveyards. Capital letters signify death. They are writing to the dead legal fiction. A legal fiction was created when someone informed the government that there was a new vessel in town based upon your birth. Birth certificates are birth certificates are issued to us by the dock, just as ships are given birth at the birth certificates at the dock. Now, you got to understand the type of game that's being played here. Now, it's about commerce. We come from our mother's waters. Your mother has a birth canal just like a ship. The ship moves through the sea current just as we are able to move by the current sea. You see the difference in this? Everything that these people have created inside of the reality, literally, it's going to correlate with nature. I promise you. And that's how they actually learn to create these systems, by studying nature and the effects of nature. Even the religion. The religions are all based off of nature. Anyway, now, all this information relates to how general public are still legally tied through maritime admiralty law. Through this ancient legal construct, we can be easily controlled and duped. Learning about your legal fiction helps you to unlock yourself. Otherwise, you are just an empty vessel floating on the sea of commerce. Parents are tricked into registering the birth of their babies. In about 1837, the Births, Deaths, and Marriages Act was formed in UK, and the post of Registrar General was established. His job was to collect all of the data from the churches which held the records of birth. Now, Regis, from the Queen of Crown, all people are seen to be in custody of the crown. This allows people to function in commerce and to accept the benefits provided by state. Now, we have to understand who we are as men and women and how we can relate in the system. The City of London is a center for markets where merchants work. Then there is mercantile law. It comes from admiralty law. Look at the symbols in your city courts. They relate to admiralty law. So, where you have commerce and money, you also have justice and injury. You need to understand the bankruptcy before you can understand the judiciary. We have accepted the claim to accept the summons, yet only the dead can be summoned. There is an obligation to accept any liability which has been created. We are operating in admiralty. A not guilty plea or any plea admits jurisdiction. The straw man, aka legal fiction, is always guilty. Barristers and solicitors make a living out of creating controversy. By creating a controversy, you become liable for the case. Honor and dishonor. To remain in honor, you have to accept the claim and settle, discharge it. Then you add conditions. That is, I accept on proof of claim and proof of loss. This gives the liability back to them. The legal fiction is always guilty. Only in a high court can the real man or woman appear. Games are played on courts, hence the name court. It is a game with actors acting out acts. It has to be treated as a game and just business courtroom drama is all just misinformation. Now, I just want to give you a quick breakdown of how this happens, because see, where I'm from, what the prosecutors and stuff like that do is they go and get what they call a bill of indictment, right? So I want to show you something. And this is because the system really has no legal authority to actually bring any charges against you. Charges is one thing, claim is another. But we don't understand the distinction from the language, because words that we use inside of our everyday language, inside of our common vocabulary, when you go off into the legal dictionaries, they don't mean the same thing. And I'm going to be getting into all of that in another depth or episode, in depth in another episode, just to show you how going into these places, when you actually admit to being a person or individual or citizen or any of these types of things, these are wordplay games that they're using to trick you into submitting yourself back into their jurisdiction. So just to get back to the point, let me show you what they do. Now, the prosecutor is the person that goes to the grand jury and secures a bill of indictment. Now, the reason that he goes to the grand jury to secure the bill of indictment is because he wants to actually exonerate himself and wash his hands from any possibilities of injury that may occur, or any possibilities of him being able to incur injury. So what he does is he gets the bill, boom, brings it to the judge. Now the judge is really just a clerk, is a third-party mediator. So the judge is now the one in response, or the one holding the liability. But because courtroom drama is literally it's a play, it's acted out. You have to actually go to school to learn how to participate in this specific type of arena. But so what they do is the judge actually has to sign off on it now. The prosecutor goes and signs off on it. But instead of actually certifying or authenticating these documents, they're bonding them. And what they use is their bonded numbers, because they do have a bond number, because they're not licensed, they're certified. You see what I mean? So they use their bond number, bam, turn it over to the judge. Now the judge signs off on it because you need 3 signatures. And because you have already accepted a public defender or hired an attorney, which is a licensed bar associated registry or federal, I'm gonna put it like this, which is literally a license, I'm not licensed, a certified federal citizen, a US citizen. And I'm gonna show you how that places you back up into their jurisdiction too. So the fact that you do that, you put yourself into the jurisdiction as a ward of the state, incapable of making your own decisions, right? So the public defender, after the judge signs off on it, is the one that actually has to be the one to get you to take some kind of a deal or agreement. And I can show you where even in the laws they have, man, it's a fee, it's a price they have to pay. You see what I mean? To go to trial, trials cost them money. But if they get all 3 signatures on these bond slips that they create, right? Indemnity bond, penal bonds, appearance bonds, bid bonds, all of these different bonds. If they can get all 3 signatures on them, each one of these bonds is worth between $1 and $2 million per bond. So literally, now the money all of that money don't go between them 3, because they belong, each of them belong to unions. Like the attorneys have a private association, right? The judges belong to a private association. The sheriff's department belongs to a private association. The attorney general, they belong to a private association, but they're all federally contracted from the same corporate entity. You see? Now, just because they use the word government doesn't mean what you think it means. It's just that you don't know how to identify the force that is ruling over your reality by nothing other than government, and view them as something that's actually supposed to be there and that's there for the people. But in reality, it's not that way. So now, just to get further into it, it's the the public defender's job to actually get you to sign off. Not you though, because they don't need your signature. You literally handed all of your rights over when you placed yourself into the jurisdictions of the court by accepting a public defender and either entering plea of guilty or not guilty. You see what I mean? So this is the game that they're actually playing. passing the buck. They're just throwing it back and forth until the public defender has to sign off on it. You see? Because if the public defender doesn't sign off on it, then the public defender has to actually be the one liable, meaning that, listen to me, the charges that you're in prison for or in jail for, you actually had to voluntarily go there. You had to be willing. You placed yourself voluntarily, unknowingly, but knowingly into their jurisdiction because they tricked you into it. They brought you into them. You see? Now, I'm telling you, there's a whole process. There's a whole remedy outside of actually having to take yourself into their court system. Because I can show you in law where it states that all crimes are commercial, and it distinguishes, it specifically identifies all crimes that are commercial crimes and are supposed to be administrative before any judicial hearings can actually take place. You're not supposed to go through a judicial hearing. And I can show you case laws when United States Supreme Court judges and have ruled inside of commentary saying that it is unlawful what these police departments and judges of the state departments are doing to the citizens. But it's the citizens that are not actually bringing the issues to the higher court. You have to specifically know what issue to raise. Any issue you don't raise in your paperwork, they will not address, even if they know that it's what must be or what is most relevant, or even if they understand that you could have actually beat your case under certain grounds, they still can't address it. And they won't. Anyway, let's get further into this. Now, in the public, we are operating in bankruptcy and you receive benefits. It takes a lot of time, effort, and study to understand and use these tools. You have to be prepared to go fully through the process, get the right tool out of your toolbox at the right time. And I'm finna show you what I mean. When the police pull you over, what that is when they give you a ticket, that's an affidavit against you. That police just literally wrote an affidavit against you. Instead of going to court, you know what you were supposed to do? You were supposed to literally get an SF-95 form, which is a tort claim, a claim of injury. Go down there, bam, file that with the ticket at their police department, man. Back with the police department at an administrative level, letting them know. Plus, I have plenty affidavits, bro, that go with something like that, showing and proving that you are not under U.S. jurisdiction. But in order for you to do any of that, you have to perfect the interest in the title. You have to authenticate your birth certificate at both state and federal levels. If you don't go and get your birth certificate authenticated at both state and federal levels, then you have no interest. You have no claim because you are still a ward of the state. And I'm finna show you this, man. Now, people need to learn how to act in creation of God rather than the creation of man. Evidence of life of person entitled of payment, form 206. Now, rights, suspension and corruption. Check this out. Canon. Now, I don't know if y'all understand what is the Roman canon law. We're going to get into that too, the difference between Roman canon law, admiralty law, maritime law, all of those different. We're going to get into that. So I want y'all to understand that what I'm reading to you really applies to you. Trust me, because there's no distinction. They're interchangeable. Roman, Roman law and civil law. They're interchangeable. Now, a Cestui Que Vie trust, also known later as a Fide Commissary trust, and later again as a Foreign Citizen trust, and also known as a form of secret trust, is a fictional concept being a temporary testamentary trust first created during the reign of Henry VIII of England through the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1540 and updated by Charles II through the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1666, wherein an estate may be effected for the benefit of one or more persons presumed lost or abandoned at sea, and therefore assumed and or presumed dead after 7 years. Additionally, presumptions by which such a trust may be formed were added in later statutes to include bankrupts, minors, incompetents, mortgages, and private companies. Now, canon law 2037. The original purpose and function of a Cestui Que Vie trust was to form a temporary estate for the benefit of another because some event, state of affairs, or condition prevented them from claiming their status as living, competent, and present before competent authority. Now, therefore, any claims, history, statutes, or arguments that deviate in terms of the origin and function of a Cestui Que Vie is pronounced by these canons if it deviates other than what's pronounced by these canons is false and automatically null and void. A Cestui Que Vie must be or may only exist for 70 years, being the traditional accepted life expectancy of the estate. Now, Canon 2039. All Cestui Que Vie trusts are created on one or more presumptions based on its original purpose and function. Such a trust cannot be created if none of these presumptions can be proven to exist. And this is the reason that they actually have you, when your child is born, they have you to fill out that form for a birth certificate. Now you get the birth certificate, but when they have you to place the child's feet on that paper and they stamp it like that right there, some countries, they actually prick the heel. But that right there is the proof of another baby actually being born, because they can, check the DNA and all of that stuff right there and see that this is another title, another contract. How you think Barack Obama got that big ass stimulus package? They took them birth certificates. Your children, your grandchildren, they're slaves. Whether you know it or not, I'm trying to tell you, I'm gonna show you in the Bible, this stuff has always been going on. These same people that's perpetrating that on us over here come from the same bloodline or family of people that's been doing this shit throughout the history. So let me show you. Now, in 1534, prior to the first Cestui Que Vie trust of 1540, Henry VIII declared the Cestui Que Vie type estate with an act of supremacy, which created the crown estate. In 1604, 70 years later, James I of England modified the estate of the crown union of crowns. By the 18th century, the crown was viewed as a company. However, by the start of the 19th century, around 1814 onwards, upon the bankruptcy of the company, 1814/15, it became the fully private crown corporation controlled by European private banker families. Now, Canon 2043. Since 1581, there has been a second series of Cestui Que Vie estates concerning the property of persons and rights which mitigated, but I got caught up, which migrated to the United States for administration, including in 1651, the Act for the Settlement of Ireland, 1651 through 52, which introduced the concept for settlements, enemies of the state, and restrictions of movement in states of emergency. And in 1861, the Emergency Power Act of 1861, and in 1931, the Emergency Relief and Construction Act of 1931. And this is where you get the words citizens and stuff like that from, persons and stuff like that, to represent slavery. Anyway, we're going to get into that too later. Now check me out. Since 1591, there has been a third series of Cestui Que Vie estates concerning the property of soul and ecclesiastical rights, which migrated to the United States for administration, including in 1661, the Act of Settlement, 1661 and 62, 1871, the District of Columbia Act of 1871, 1941, the Lend-Lease Act of 1941. And y'all can pull these acts up, man. Now, by 1815, in the bankruptcy of the Crown and Bank of England by the Rothschilds, I'm sorry, let me get this back. By 1815, in the bankruptcy of the Crown and Bank of England by the Rothschilds, for the first time, the Cestui Que Vie Trust of the United States became assets placed in private banks, effectively becoming private trusts or fiat commissary trusts, administered by commissioners, guardians. From 1835, in the Wills Act, these private trusts have been also considered secret trusts whose existence does not need to be divulged. You see that? They have been considered as secret trusts whose existence does not need to be divulged. From 1917 through 1918, with the enactment of the Sedition Act and the Trading with the Enemy Act in the United States and through the United Kingdom, the citizens of the Commonwealth and the United States became effectively enemies of the state and aliens, which in turn converted the fiat commissary private trusts to foreign citizens, private international trusts. Now, Canon 2047. In 1931, the Roman Court, also known as the Vatican, created the Bank for International Settlements for the control of claimed property of associated private central banks around the world. Upon deliberate bankruptcy of most countries, private central banks were installed as administrators, and global Cestui Que Vie / foreign citizen trust system was implemented from 1933 onwards. Now, Canon 2048, since 1933, when a child is born in a state, meaning in a state under inferior Roman law, 3 Cestui Que Vie trusts are created upon certain presumptions: the birth certificate, the social security number, and the strawman, which is the ens legis. Now, specifically designed to deny the child forever any rights of real property, any rights as a free person, and any rights to be known as man and woman rather than a creature or animal by claiming and possessing their soul or spirit. Now, I'm serious now. You got to look up, what does the word human being mean in the law dictionary? That you're an animal. That's where the word came from. They legalese. Anyway, since 1933, when a child is born in a state, I'm sorry, I did that. Now, Canon 2049. Since 1933, upon a new child being born, the executors or administrators of the higher estate willingly and knowingly convey the beneficial entitlements of the child as beneficiary into the first Cestui Que Vie trust in the form of a registry number by the registering the name, thereby also creating the corporate person and denying the child any rights as an owner or real property. And this is where they actually create the ens legis. So what they do is they learned how to take control of the trust that was created in your name by creating papers that were contracts that, once your mother signed those papers, placed you under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, no longer as an American national, but as a citizen now. And I'm going to show you what that means. Now, since 1933, when a child is born, the executors or administrators of the higher estate knowingly and willingly claim the baby as chattel to the estate. The slave baby contract is then created by honoring the ancient tradition of either having an ink impression of the feet of the baby onto the live birth record, or a drop of his blood, as well as tricking the parents into signing the baby away through the deceitful meanings on a live birth record. Now, this live birth record as a promissory note is converted into a slave bond, sold to the private reserve bank of the estate, and then conveyed into a second and separate Cestui Que Vie trust per child owned by the bank. Upon a promissory note reaching maturity and being and the bank being unable to seize the slave child, a maritime lien is lawfully issued to salvage the lost property and itself monetized as currency issued in series against the Cestui Que Vie trust. So you got to see that, man, like, they don't have any problem with identifying you, like, as the slave, as, the servant, as the property. Now I'm just going through a couple of more here. Each Cestui Que Vie trust created since 1933 represents one of the three crowns representing the three claims of property of the three Roman cults. Now, seriously, I'm sorry. I went too far. The three claims of property of the Roman cult being real property, personal property, and ecclesiastical property, and the denial of any rights to men and women under then those chosen as loyal members of the society as executors and administrators. Now, the three Cestui Que Vie trusts are the specific denial of rights of real property, personal property, and ecclesiastical property for most men and women, corresponds exactly to the three forms of law available to the gala of the Bar Association courts. Now, the first form of law is corporate commercial law, is effective because of the first Cestui Que Vie trust. The second form of law is maritime and trust law, is effective because of the second Cestui Que Vie trust. The third form of law is Talmudic and Roman cult law, is effective because of the third Cestui Que Vie trust of baptism. Now, you got to go back through this, man. I'm telling you, the second form of law, no, first and foremost, I want y'all to get that the first form of law is corporate commercial law. Commercial law is effective because of the first Cestui Que Vie trust. The second form of law is maritime law, and trust law is effective because of the second Cestui Que Vie trust. The third form of law is Talmudic, and the Roman cult law is effective because of the third Cestui Que Vie trust of baptism. I got baptized as a kid, man. I remember that shit too. Pissed me off. The birth certificate issued under Roman law represents the modern equivalent to the settlement certificates of the 17th century and signifies the holder as a pauper and effectively a Roman slave. The birth certificate has no direct relationship to the private secret trusts controlled by the private banking network, nor can it be used to force the administration of a state or nation to divulge the existence of these secret trusts. Now I'm finna show y'all why. There's always a clause. Now, as the Cestui Que Vie trusts are created as private secret trusts on multiple presumptions, including the ongoing bankruptcy of certain national estates, they remain the claimed property or private property of the Roman coat banks and therefore cannot be directly claimed or issued. While the private secret trusts of the private central banks cannot be directly addressed, they are still formed on certain presumptions of law, including claimed ownership of the name, the body, the mind, and soul of infants, men, and women. Each and every man and woman has the absolute right to rebuke and reject such false presumptions as a holder of their own title. Like I told you, I'm finna show you where it even says in law today, you have to step up and claim ownership. You have to step up and claim entitlement. Watch. Given the private secret trusts of the private central banks are created on false presumptions, when a man or woman makes clear their live-born record and claim over their own name, body, mind, soul, any such truth based on such false presumptions ceases to have any property. Now, any administrator or executive that refuses to immediately dissolve a Cestui Que Vie trust upon a person establishing their status and competency is guilty of fraud and fundamental breach of their fiduciary duties, requiring their immediate removal and punishment. Now, going down, one can take control of the trust estate or dissolve it completely and move all asset to your own account and take control of your copyright name, trademark, and trade name and write a promissory note, as this is tender cash. Whether y'all know it or not, even though we know that Congress had, made a distinction, and I mean, you can look this up, McFadden versus Congress. On the floor of Congress, he made a clear distinction that the promissory note, the fiat currency, is not lawful monies. You see what I mean? It's a mere promise to pay someday. I promise you, these is what promissory notes are. And this is the reason that they keep telling you we're going bankrupt, because ain't nobody actually stepping up to write off their debt, to claim the debt, to exonerate the debt, to absolve the debt. You see what I'm saying? It's just everybody just racking up debt. Y'all just spending promissory notes, promissory notes, promissory notes, promissory notes. Nobody's actually writing off the debt. So now, getting up out of that, I want to show y'all something else. We're coming up out of here now. We're coming up out of here now. I want to take you to something. Now, the very meaning of sovereignty is that the decree of the sovereign makes law. This is American Banana Co. versus United Fruit Co. Now, this is an United States Supreme Court case. Now, I don't know if y'all know who Justice Marshall is, but let me show y'all something he say. He said, the ideal prevails with some. Indeed, it has expression in arguments at the bar that we have in this country substantially two national governments, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument by exercising such powers as other nations of earth are accustomed to. Now, I take leave to say that if the principles thus announced should ever receive the sanction of a majority of this court, a radical and mischievous change in our system will result. We will, in that event, pass from the era of constitutional liberty, guarded and protected by a written constitution, in an era of legislative absolutism. It would be an evil day for American liberty if the theory of a government outside the supreme law of the land finds lodgment in our constitutional jurisprudence. No higher duty rests upon this court than to exert its full authority to prevent all violation of the principles of the Constitution. Honorable Supreme Court Justice John Harlan in 1901, case versus Downs versus Bidwell. Case of Down versus Bidwell. Now, John Marshall Harlan, June 1st, 1833, October 14, 1911, man, was an American lawyer and politician who served as an associate justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, even in almost every nation which has been denominated free, the state has assumed a supercilious preeminence above the people who have formed it. Now, just think of that, man. The state has assumed a supercilious preeminence above the people who have formed it. Hence the hardy notions of state independence, state sovereignty, and state supremacy. In despotic governments, the government has usurped in a similar manner both upon the state and the people, hence all arbitrary doctrines, the pretensions concerning the supreme, absolute, and incontrollable power of government. And each man is degraded from the prime rank which he ought to hold in human affairs, and the latter, the state, as well as the man is degraded. Man, that man ain't just play. Man, listen, he say, man, in each man is degraded from the prime rank which he ought to hold in human affairs, and the latter, the state, as well as the man is degraded. Now, let me give y'all something so y'all understand something. This is literally, let me move this real fast, man. This thing is in my way. This is 28 U.S. Code, subsection 3002. I want y'all to go all the way over here, right here to 15A. You see why I'm toggling that over here? The United States means a federal corporation. It's right here. 28 USC, subsection 3002, 15A. Hold on now. Subsection 9, 307, location of debtor. Location of United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. United States is always the debtor. Now, citizenship is a political status and may be defined in privilege limited by Congress. Okay, now check this out. You see this? Citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privilege limited by Congress. Now, this is a case law. This is real. Fung Sing, Federal Reporter, 2nd Series, Volume 6. You can look this shit up. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. There is a lawful state, there is a federal territory, a municipal corporation. There has been created a fictional federal state of XXXXX within a state. See Howard versus Sinking Fund of Louisville, because whether you know it or not, Congress gave the United States or the federal government the authority to create a state. It didn't give them the ability to create a city within a state or a territory or a municipal power. It just gave them the ability to create a state. So they took some of Virginia and what else was it? Kentucky and something else they took, Maryland. They took pieces of those three states to make that little 11-mile radius. And I'm going to show you this shit, man, so that we can get a real understanding as to, man, what the hell is we scared to just speak up for? It's not like we asking nobody to cause some type of riots or incite no type of disturbance. No, you don't have to be afraid to cite the law, to actually take before them case law. This is actual rulings, and this is legislative language. Now, it is a well-established principle of law that all federal regulation applies only within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. And I'm finna show you that the United States is literally only defined and classified as that 11-mile radius, as I just showed you. But I'm finna take you further into showing you that the United States literally is only the District of Columbia. The reason that they have been able to get out here so far into these contractual agreements or into your reality is through contractual agreements. Now, there is a canon of legislation or legislative construction, which teaches Congress that unless a contrary intent appears, legislation is meant to apply only within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, the District of Columbia. This is United States versus Spiller. Now, this is a real case law, man. They're not lying about this. It's just that these courts have jumped in cahoots amongst themselves because they see how ignorant to the law we are. Now, a U.S. citizen is not entitled to an Article III court, but instead gets an Article I court with the plenary military dictatorship jurisdiction in Article I, Section 8, Clause 17, Constitution for the United States of America as defined and reinstated, and National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company. Now, which further states that citizens of the District of Columbia are not embraced by the judicial power under Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States of America. The same statement is held in Hepburn versus Dundas. The United States Supreme Court, through Chief Justice Marshall, held that a citizen of the District of Columbia was not a citizen of a state. You have a citizen of the United States, right? And then you have nationals, sovereigns, not sovereign citizens, but sovereigns of the several states. Private people. We are the people. See, we can be that. We are the people. Now, we therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within the Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of states were not included into the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington, District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states and union. Now, I'm finna show you something. So here it is. Now, let's just say we have this almighty creator, right? Now, the creator creates us. Now, we create the government, right? So, okay, the government creates, okay, not only do we create the government, but we have the government create a constitution, which is a set of rules and regulations that they have to abide by to promise us that there is a security between protecting our constitutionally born rights versus their statutorily accredited privileges. Now, let's get further into this, man. Now, state citizens are the only ones living under free government whose rights are incapable of impairment by legislation or judicial decision. I'm telling you, you have to authenticate your birth certificate. You have to literally get both. You got to get that thing authenticated at both state and federal levels. State citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no power to divest or impair these rights. The state cannot diminish rights of the people. Now, it's even in your Constitution that no state can create a statute, because statutes are only federal rules that apply to federal employees of a federal corporation. What they did was they hired publication companies to come in and codify the law. And when they codified the law, they placed it into statutes, codes, rules, and regulations. But those statutes, codes, rules, and regulations apply to the corporation, not the sovereign states. If I go to Great America, a place that has a no tattoo policy, like if you got tattoos on your arms and stuff, you got to have either Band-Aids on it, or you have to have on long sleeve shirts if you're an employee. But if you're a shopper, not under their contract or under their contractual agreements, then you don't have to oblige by or abide by their rules and regulations. There's a different set or class of regulations now that would underline the limits of what the visitors can and cannot do. And those are set out only with the utmost respects of the freedoms of your constitutional value. They just understand how to function between private and public. Now, if a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel and maketh merchandise of him or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. And through covetous shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. These are Bible scriptures, man. But I'm showing you that this is what the money changers in the past, in the old days, was doing. Because first of all, let's get an understanding that all of that information that we believe is history, it's not really so far history as we believe it is. You see? Now, understanding that it's not so far as history as we believe it is, then we just have to understand that, that the same people that were foisting these injustices upon these people, the same bloodline, same family of people, are actually doing it to us through this securitized system. This is what slavery is. And this is what I meant when I said that, see, slavery never really existed inside of the way that most people think it did. I can show you that even Alex Haley created the book off of all lies. His story, I got all the documents proving that, man, like, he created the book off of some files that he got a hold to. And then comes the movie Roots. But I'm not saying that slavery wasn't real in a sense, because slavery has a real legal term. Now, was invasion and persecution real? War real? Yes, but you have to also understand the devastation that we just came up out of. So anyway, I don't want to go too far into all of that. I want to keep going because I got something else to show you. Now, Rule 220, this is general practice of Rules 220, birth certificates. The registrar of titles is authorized to receive for registration of memorials upon any outstanding certificate of title, an official birth certificate pertaining to a registered owner named in said certificate of title, showing the date of birth of said registered owner, providing there is attached to said birth certificate an affidavit of an affiant who states that he or she is familiar with the facts recited, stating that the party named in the said birth certificate is the same party as one of the owners named in said certificate of title, shall treat said registered owner as having attained the age of majority at the date 18 years after the date of birth shown by the said certificate. Yeah, I ain't the best reader. I'm sorry. My eyes is bad when I read so much, man, that like literally it's all good. I got y'all though. Now, do you hear what he's saying though? The registrar of titles is authorized to receive for registration of memorials upon any outstanding certificate of title, an official birth certificate pertaining to a registered owner named in a certificate of title showing the date of birth of said registered owner, providing there is attached. You have to have this. And listen to me, you have to have it. The affidavit. I'm telling you, this affidavit. But they're showing you right here in General Rules of Practice, Rules 220. You literally have to legally step up now and authenticate your documents at both state and federal levels. Yes, I have everything that you need, the complete understanding. I don't care what it is. If you want to set up a trust, private trust, I can show you. Yes, I can do all of this. This is like, now I'm already so far advanced with this stuff that, I don't think that it's too much that I don't really understand about it or don't know how to do about it. You see what I mean? And whatever it is that I don't know yet about it, because, there's always different laws and different rules that are coming into play throughout the states. And whether you know it or not, the good faith, good faith. But the good faith clause states that any laws, statutes, or constitutional amendments or anything else that is admitted into evidence inside of one state must be respected and admitted in another state. You see what I'm saying? So, or throughout all the states, meaning that even if you see a case law that have been ruled inside of Ohio, you can use it in Illinois. You see what I mean? Because of the goodwill and faith clause. Anyway, let's keep going. Now, Article 1, Section 10 of the USA 1789/1791 Constitution prohibits states from using anything but actual gold and silver, gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debt. Now I'm finna show y'all something though, because of the simple. Hey, listen, I'm finna show y'all how they got away with that, because they went back into the Constitution, or not into the Constitution, but I'm gonna show you how they did it. Because now, listen what it say. Okay. It say the Constitution prohibits the states from using anything but actual gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debt. But now what they call it is legal tender. You see what I mean? They call it legal tender. Instead of lawful monies, legal tender. Federal Reserve notes are defined as obligations in 18 U.S.C. 8 and 31 U.S.C. 3124 prohibits states from taxing federal obligations except for corporations. So if a U.S. citizen or resident alien can be taxed in Federal Reserve notes, then they are a United States corporation / U.S. citizen. A state citizen is not, and no unconstitutional tax can be levied against a state citizen. And Congress has no authority over state citizens, since many across the nation has figured out that citizenship fraud and are correcting the fraud via passport. The enemy is in panic. The IRS has the right to inquire about taxes if you cannot prove state citizenship. I'm going to show you that even inside of the IRS handbook or manual, it states that taxes, your paying taxes is voluntary. Literally, I promise you. See, unless the defendant can prove he is not a citizen of the United States, the IRS has the right to inquire and determine a tax liability, U.S. versus Slater. Now, the acceptance of a license in whatever form, driver's license, anything, will not impose upon the licensee an obligation to respect or comply with any provision of the statute or with the regulations prescribed that are repugnant to the Constitution of the United States. Also, see, speeding, running stop signs, traveling without a driver's license or a license plate or registration are not threats to public safety and thus are not arrestable offenses. Christie versus Elliott. United States versus Anthony, 24 Federal FED 829, 1873. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of the several states, in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. Now, Louisiana was one of the first states that gave its citizens an out back in 1923. And what they stated was corporate existence was presumed unless affidavit of denial was filed before trial. On trial of any criminal case, it shall not be necessary to prove the corporation or the incorporation of any corporation mentioned in the indictment, unless the defendant, before entering upon such trial, shall have filed his affidavit specifically denying the existence of such corporation. So you see, Louisiana was the first people, and this is what it's called. Article 4, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and the Congress may by general law prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. The citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or any other crime who shall flee from justice and be found any yada, 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 yada. Anyway, let me show y'all something about these lawyers. First and foremost, never believe that your attorney works for you. His first duty is to the courts and to the public, not to the client. And whenever his duties to his client conflict with those as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter. And this is not me. I didn't write this. This is 7 Corpus Juris Secundum, subsection 4. This is the attorney's manual. Who are attorneys? However, he is, however, in a sense, an officer of the state of an obligation to the court. Do you hear this? He is, however, in a sense, an officer of the state with an obligation to the court. This is 7 Corpus Juris Secundum, subsection 4. This is not me making this up. I'm just showing y'all what's inside of their books. Like they say, man, you need to get into these books. Stop being so entertained while these people are creating more and more restrictions and limitations that place them so far into your reality that before you know it, they have security sleeping in your house with you. Seriously, your house will be governed by rules and regulations. I mean, they'll have cameras at every door, making sure that they can monitor. And I'm telling you, this is what they're moving you into, and nobody's paying attention. It's like everybody's yelling, hey, watch out, look up. But everybody's still running with their head down. Brown versus, now this is a case of United States versus Brown. Now check this out. Let me see. Okay, it says, this is volume 2, 100, lays down the rules in these terms. The general rule, however, at present is that the Admiralty Act only in rem, and that no person can be subject to that jurisdiction but by his consent expressed by his entering into a stipulation. I'm telling you, man, they make you enter unconsciously or unknowingly into contracts with them by even identifying yourself when they call your name, because that is not your name. That name does not belong to you. You only hold titleship to it. They own it. In Krebel's report 500, quoted by Brown, it is expressly said that without a stipulation, the Admiralty has no jurisdiction at all over the person. This is a United States case, Ramsey versus Allegri, whoever. Quoted by Brown, it is expressly said that without a stipulation, the Admiralty has no jurisdiction at all over the person. Civil law, Roman law, and Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence. The rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. See Bauer, Modified Civil Law. This is Black's Law Dictionary, Revived 4th edition. Admiralty law. The terms admiralty and maritime law are virtually synonymous. Black's Law, 6th edition. It might be correctly said that there is no such thing as a citizen of the United States. A citizen of any one of the states of the Union is held to be and called a citizen of the United States, although technically and abstractly there is no such thing. Do you hear that, man? A citizen of any one of the states of the Union is held to be and called a citizen of the United States. Now I'm going to show you something, because you might say, well, who's in the state of the Union? Not you, baby. You enemy of the state. The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the First, 8th Amendments to federal Constitution against the powers of federal government. The only absolute and unqualified right of the United States citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. U.S. versus Valentine. You hear that? The only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is the resident within the territorial boundaries. What is that? Military bases, post offices. You see what I mean? Stuff like that. Only federal buildings are federal jurisdiction. Literally, only federal buildings are federal jurisdiction. There is a whole process that you need to take, man. If you sitting there and you tired of your family, and where I'm from, this is a consistent. The police will pull up in the neighborhood and just jump out on you for walking up the street and throw you up against the car, plant drugs on you, plant guns on you and everything just to keep the quota right. But I'm trying to show y'all that as a collective, we need to start coming together so that we can sharpen each other's tools, and we don't have to be placed up under the subjection of slavery, their jurisdiction. And it's not saying that we have to fight for anything. It's not fighting. It's sharpening your tool and using the information that's already available. They're using information that they wrote specifically for them and placing it in front of your face as if it applies to you too. And because you don't know how to actually challenge it, you accept it. So now it's just time for us to come together and stop beefing and battling with each other, because we each can help each other with this shit. And that's all I'm really trying to do, is show y'all, man, that, listen, you don't have to go through all of that stuff. It's not called tax evasion. It's called tax avoidance. And whether you know it or not, avoiding paying taxes is not unlawful. If you are smart enough or intelligent enough to set up your finances in such a way that there is no taxes, that is not unlawful. You better check this. How do you think these corporations like Uber, Google, and all of these, Amazon and them, they don't pay taxes? If you are smart enough to set up your legal affairs in such a way that you don't have to actually subject yourself to the jurisdiction of this federal corporate entity, then you don't have to. You do so through contractual agreements, driver's licenses. You have a right to travel as a free sovereign person. But when you go get a driver's license, you give up the right and take on the state's privileges now, not to travel, but to drive. Because a driver and a traveler there's a distinction between the meaning of what they mean. In legalese, a driver is a commercial passenger. A driver's license is only required for commercial drivers. If you are not driving a commercial vehicle for public use, you are not a driver. You are a traveler, and a traveler does not have to have a commercial driver's license. But if you don't know no better, then they just throw you right up under their jurisdiction. I have over 100 cases ruled on this specific thing by all of the higher courts. Like, it's just us. We don't know no better, and they know we don't know no better, so they're playing on our weaknesses. Your debt collectors, they can't send you anything if it's not signed under penalty of perjury. If it's not, send it back with a cease and desist letter. Ask them, do they own the original copy of the original signature to the contract that you signed? No, they won't. You see, citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privileged, limited by government. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states, in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. I'm just giving it to y'all, man. I already read this to y'all. Now, under international law of warfare, all parties to a cause must appear by nom de guerre. I don't know how to say that. Because an alien enemy cannot maintain an action during a war in its own name. This is the reason that they do all of this with this ens legis. They create all of these papers with your name in all capital letters because of the act that's being portrayed, and because you are either suspected to be dead, lost at sea, or either dead or lost at sea and cannot do business in your own name. Obviously, they created a state fiction for you that the straw man can take liability for under contractual agreement. Next time you have a check, I want you to look at it. Your personal checks, look at them. At the top of that check, your name is already going to be provided for you, courtesy of your bank, in all capital letters, right? As the holder, which is the straw man of the account. So at the bottom where you sign your name, only you think that those two entities are the same. But if you get a magnifying glass and look at that line that you just signed, you will see it says something totally different that you just signed on. You just became the endorser when you signed your signature. Because see, the straw man doesn't have a signature. The straw man is written in just the way you see it, the way it comes, all caps, always. All corporations have to be written in capital letters. And it was ruled by Congress that corporations needed to have last names. The exclusive jurisdiction which the United States have in forts and dockyards ceded to them is derived from the express assent of the states by whom the cessions are made. It could be derived in no other manner, because without it, the authority of the state would be supreme and exclusive therein. I've told you, man, listen, the United States is the federal government. They don't have any jurisdiction over you. They only have jurisdiction over you if you don't understand that they don't, like if you voluntarily allow them to, and you do it unconsciously, unknowingly. Now, it is a well-established principle of law that all federal regulation applies only within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Foley Brothers, Inc. versus Filato. Do you hear that? It is a well-established principle of law that all federal regulation applies only within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. And didn't I just show y'all where is the United States? District of Columbia. There is a canon of legislative construction which teaches Congress that unless a contrary intent appears, legislation is meant to apply only within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, the District of Columbia. You see? Mm-mm. Now, let me go into this with you. The term individual means a citizen of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence. 5 USC subsection 552A, A2. 13. The term federal personnel means officers and employees of the government of the United States, members of the uniformed services, including members of the reserve components, individuals entitled to receive immediate or deferred retirement benefits under any retirement program of the government of the United States, including survivor benefits. State citizens are the only ones living under free government whose rights are incapable of impairment by legislature or judicial decision. Because you have not authenticated those documents, stepped up and told the government who you are and what you are still a state citizen, a ward of the state. State citizenship, not a state citizen, I'm sorry. You are not a state citizen, you are a United States citizen, a ward of the state. State citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no right to divest or impair these rights. The state cannot diminish rights of the people. You see this, man? You were born with these rights. Now, the definition of the United States being used here then is limited to its territories. 1, the District of Columbia. 2, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. 3, U.S. Virgin Islands. 4, Guam. 5, America Samoa. 6, Northern Mariana Islands. 7, Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. 8, military bases within the 50 states. 9, federal agencies within the 50 states, including U.S. post offices. Yes, if you use a zip code, and I'm gonna get into that in my next video. I don't got time to go too hard into it right now, man. I just wanted to put all of this in front of y'all, man. And you know what I ain't show y'all? Public Law 10, where is it at? And this is what you can get into just to get a better understanding too, man. Look, the Declaration of Public Trust of the United States of America, presented as a presidential proclamation on November 19, 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln. But I want to show y'all something else. Public Law 10, which removed all lawful money in gold and silver from the state to pay its employees and for the people, the means to receive pay for sweat equity and pay debt. In 1933, President Roosevelt passed House Joint Resolution 192. It was repealed. But Public Law 10 is the actual act that you need. House Joint Resolution 192, no. Public Law 10, Chapter 48, 48 Stat 112. That's what you need. Go into that. All right, man. I just jumped in here so I can show y'all this. I ain't really gonna keep y'all no longer. I love y'all, wholeness and balance to all my people, man.